when the Nintendo Switch first launched, it really didn't have much accessibility. You could invert colors, you could go grayscale. I talked about this in a video. As a gamer with less than 10% of sight, that is not correctable. I tried some games. I had fun, casual playthroughs of Zelda, Mario, and some games had some accessibility options, but the system itself really did not offer a whole lot. It has improved, but it's still far from, I'd say, the competition. Now, I will show you what I currently do today to help make my gaming experience on Nintendo's platform, the Nintendo Switch, more accessible. What options are there? Again, it's not a long list at all, but it has gotten better. Hey, if we don't know each other, my name is James Rath. I'm a legally blind filmmaker and content creator. On my platforms, I like to share things like technology, even how video games, or how I travel independently, and just from a different angle of like how this stuff is accessible for folks with vision loss. So if that piques your curiosity, if you want to learn how accessibility benefits all of us, not just visually impaired, disabled folks, come along and you can see different with me. Brief history on Nintendo and accessibility. Fun fact, they were one of the first who actually pioneered accessibility in the gaming industry. But I'll be honest, they're one of the first to fall off and have a pretty drastic, innovative drought. What I just mean by that is, back during the NES days, they had a controller, Nintendo of America, I should say, specifically. They helped develop a controller with nonprofits. For instance, children in hospitals could play the NES because they had a custom-made controller that worked for children with physical disabilities, and they could input in different ways. Very innovative, especially in the 1980s. Awesome stuff. You can read up on that. I'll have links in the description. So again, when the Nintendo Switch originally launched, it had invert colors, it had grayscale, and that was about it. There was some accessibility in some individual games, and you could count there was some accidental accessibility, and that's a whole other topic to get into. For context, I've made a video about what I see when I'm playing video games with my current vision. It's all pretty much blurry. It's overexposed, it's very, very blurry, and things are shaking. So where do you find zoom? You're gonna need to go to your system settings, scroll all the way down to system, until you get down to under change display colors, which is, as I mentioned before, it's that invert or grayscale. Just tap it on. Very helpful, especially if you are in handheld mode. So by double clicking the home button, you get into the zoom. Now this is an overlay on the system itself. So now any interaction I'm making is in the zoom menu and not the actual system. Let me explain real quick what our controls are here, because they're actually nice and outlined with pretty large text. It's not the biggest text in the world, but it's not small text, which you tend to find a lot with a lot of these developers. So this is good. It says zoom, so you know you're in the zoom menu. You can cancel out of the zoom menu by double clicking the home button again. Try that. Cool, we're out of it. Let's double click it to re-enable. You can lock it by just clicking it once. And now I'm interacting with my menu again. So I'm able to move my joystick across my menu. Perfect. I can double click once again to either cancel the zoom, or I can one click to get back and unlock the adjustment. So I clicked it once, so now I'm able to make adjustments again. And now Y will let you zoom out, and X lets you zoom in. And you actually have a meter to show you how strong your zoom is. And once you're zoomed in all the way, the X fades out. So it's a really good UI. This is actually pretty, like the way that Nintendo did implement this really surprised me, because this is a company that isn't practicing accessibility features often, but this feels like something you'd find in like a smartphone, like Android or iOS, that it feels really well done. Now, when you're in this menu, you can move around with one joystick, and that feels, it's a little slow. It's fine, if you just want to kind of skim around. Maybe there's text on screen, you're playing a point and click adventure game, maybe there's just dialogue and a story that you want to read through. But you can also speed that up by taking both joysticks, and that's pretty nice. And as you move to the top, the text with the instructions on how to interact with the zoom suddenly moves and bounces back from top to bottom, which again, this feels very well thought out, and they really haven't updated this. This launched like this. And again, I'm very impressed, and I'm very happy and maybe very hopeful that more accessibility options were coming, and there were. Specifically custom controls. You can finally map all your inputs and make profiles for that, but beyond that, for vision, nothing else really. Now I want to show you how this works in handheld mode, because it's actually pretty cool, and again, where this feels kind of like something you'd find in a smartphone. It's going to be very similar, whether you're on the Switch Lite, the regular Nintendo Switch, or the Switch OLED. Once again, double click the home button, and you can zoom in and out with X and Y, move around the screen with your Joy-Cons joysticks, or even my favorite part, use the touch screen to just pinch and zoom and drag your fingers around that screen. And then you just press to lock and move around the screen just like that. Just get a quick closer look into whatever it is you're playing, especially if you're in handheld mode. There's also one other major accessibility feature that was added, and that is button mapping. This is added, I think, in the last year, maybe year and a half. Scroll down a bit until you get to controller and, let's use zoom. Controllers and sensors. And when you get there, should be the second option down. It's gonna be change button mapping. When you tap on that, here you can actually change the layout of like your Joy-Cons, your Pro controller, and you can set different profiles, which is pretty cool. So maybe you're coming from like a PlayStation or an Xbox, maybe you're just coming from a different console altogether, and you are getting confused with the A and B. You know, on Xbox it's opposite, so you can swap those around. Pretty helpful. And that's been a closer look at zoom on the Nintendo Switch. That was a pun. See what I did there? Another pun. I'm sorry. So if you are curious a little bit more about how I game and stuff, I did this recently on the PlayStation 5. Maybe I'll do one on Xbox. Let me know in those comments if you're curious. I'm also working on a full-on Nintendo Switch OLED review, and just kind of my experience using that in comparison to the regular Switch, as well as the Switch Lite, which with my eyes, I got some comments to say about it. So again, I'm gonna be sharing those thoughts in a future video. If you're curious, stick around. Let me know in those comments, will you be using Zoom? Maybe handheld, maybe dock only? Let me know. I hope you could see something different today, and I'll hear you next time. Bye.